Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Ochi. My name is American Ben, and today we're gonna talk about Extracurricular. And we're damn excited to do it because this show was great. Now, for those who need a refresher, Extracurricular tells the story of a young, soft-spoken man named Jisoo who, in need of money to go to college, starts a compensated dating business, aka a sex work outfit, all the while trying to navigate the ins and outs and general struggles of high school. That's it. That's a pretty good, decent, brief synopsis of the show, obviously much shorter than the synopsis we offered for The Uncanny Counter. Some shows just have more complicated narratives and more subplots than others. Where Extracurricular's plot is relatively straightforward relative to The Uncanny Counter, it has a whole lot going on underneath its surface. Its themes are varied and well fleshed out, and they take a while to truly uncover. When the show first began, I was like, okay, we're gonna explore the perils of being a sex worker in modern-day South Korea. I thought that the show was going to heavily focus on the experiences that the workers in Jisoo's employ faced. After all, when the show began, we did see some of their perspective. And had the show stayed on this track, that would have been perfectly fine. This is obviously a very important issue to shed some light on. However, the show wasn't really so much about the sex work itself. After the first few episodes, it basically showed very little of the sex worker side of things. Instead, the show centered on Jisoo's struggles and his relationships with the characters around him. And honestly, while for some this might make for a less provocative narrative, for me it resulted in a show that was much deeper than I'd expected. Now, even after I recognized that the show was not going to view the world through the lens of sex workers' eyes, my first inclination was to say, okay, this show is going to be about teenage angst.
나중에 무슨 일이 하고 싶은데?
돈 버는 거 아무거나요.
You have these kids, really, who are anxious about entering into a highly competitive world in which expectations for modern-day young adults are extremely high, especially in terms of educational and professional accomplishment. We do, after all, see Gyuri's parents exact on her a rigid lifestyle filled with a disciplined and perhaps even draconian diet and a reading list overrun with books by top CEOs.
주무셨어요?
자, 완벽한 몸매를 위해서.
And so when Gyuri responded by imagining herself brutally murdering her parents and then chowing down on the good stuff, I had a few thoughts spring to mind. First, I totally understand. Well, no, not the killing the parents thing. Just, I'm not gonna hate on someone who prefers to not go for the green smoothie. I mean, I've seen what those things can do in K-dramas. And second thought, Gyuri is highly stressed and having hyperbolic, rebellious thoughts. Well, I suppose there might be some truth to that latter thought, but honestly, sitting here post-series finale, now I'm not sure that she didn't actually want to kill her parents. Or maybe she didn't, I don't know. The mystery of Gyuri is part of the beauty of this character, a character I consider to be one of the best I've seen in a drama, yet actually one of the best I've seen in any show in a while, but more on that if I do a dedicated video on her. Actually, all of the characters in the show are somewhat mysterious, because they never really expound upon their feelings to anyone.
진짜 이러다 퍽 하고 터질 것 같은데 그래도 버티는 거. 졸라게 혼자서.
They keep everything bottled up inside, something represented by Jisoo's obsession with hermit crabs and other guarded critters. Hermit crabs hide in their shells to avoid danger, and I suppose Jisoo refrains from opening himself up to do the same. He doesn't want to get hurt, but more so, he's just very hesitant to trust anyone. And so throughout the show, we're made to witness our central two characters remain relatively unable to express their feelings to one another. The world has backed them up into their shells by hurting them. The guardedness is conditioned as they've both been hurt before. But the crabs are really a whole other conversation beyond the scope of this video.
도망가, 지수야.
그냥 숨어 있어, 지수야. 나오지 마. 안 돼.
안 돼.
도망가야 돼.
As it turns out, the true theme of this show is once again despair. Just kidding. Although there is a touch of despair, as there always is in any show or in life, Gyuri has after all attempted suicide twice. She certainly struggled with her thoughts and her situation. However, to me, what Extracurricular is truly about in the broadest sense, and this is somewhat related to despair, I suppose, is how society forces the peoples contained within it to conform to its norms, even if the rules and regulations composing these norms are set against one's nature, nurture, or general predilections. And thus such people are cast against the prevailing normativity and are advanced upon their doom.
아니 나 얘네 지금 가계부 보고 있는데 얘네 떡 장사한 돈으로 뭐 했는 줄 아냐?
뭐 했니?
학교 다녔다 학교.
학교?
Extracurricular's world is one in which parents and other authority figures are either completely absent or are neglectful of the young people beholden to them. Jisoo's dad is a lowlife and a hex upon his struggling son as he lies to and steals from him. So here Jisoo is without the means to rise in life and yet still desirous of the simple things that most people want, a chance to succeed in life to a reasonable level.
돈 버는 거 아무거나요.
야, 너 컨셉 진짜 극혐이다.
극혐이 뭐예요?
Then, Yuri's parents are selfish themselves and have their own interests in mind, even if the ascent towards their ultimate aims comes at the expense of their daughter. And this is an important moment. See, Yuri doesn't really react to the sexual harassment she's victim to. I'm sure her parents have put her in this position before, and I'm sure that many of the show's female characters have had similar experiences. Thus, Yuri does not display palpable shock in the moment. Her trauma has long been had. Then, of course, there's Minhee, who lives with her aunt and despite being as young as she is, has to make ends meet.
남친 이혼 후 잠적 그리고 나서 부모 집에서 살고 있고
And for her, the best way to make that happen is to sell her body. And this, by the way, highlights one of the show's sub-themes, which is how all of these terrible things happen to society's youth right under adults' noses. Some don't notice what's going on and others simply let it go. Kids get abused and no one protects them. There are a few adults who try to help. Mr. Cho makes some waves, but ultimately he's powerless to turn the tide of times. By offering us the context for the character's illicit actions that it does, the show in a very brilliant way forces us to constantly question, who's the bad guy? I mean, okay, there are some obvious choices such as Tweedledum and Tweedledee here, and then there is also Jisoo's dad and Yuri's mom and so on. But what about Jisoo himself? I mean, he constantly tries to scare Minhee away from going to the authorities and telling them the truth about what's going on. We can probably pretty safely say Jisoo does this against Minhee's interests.
너가 경찰한테 거짓말 안 하면 그 사람이 막 너 어떻게 할 수도 있잖아.
But then again, there are also some times that Jisoo appears to care about Minhee's safety and feelings.
나 일할 수 있어.
하세요.
다만 우리랑은 말고.
너무 심한 거 아니야?
But then again, it's hard to tell when Jisoo is actually demonstrating true compassion or when he's only acting like he cares purely out of self-interest. And then, what about Yuri? On one hand, she's enthusiastic about engaging in illicit activity, even pushes Jisoo back into the game. But then again, she also sacrifices her own well-being at times to help Jisoo. Or what about Kitai, the bully of the show and boyfriend of Minhee? He's an obvious antagonist, right? Well, he sure didn't feel like a bad guy when he showed up to take down Dayal. The thing is, these characters are pretty complex. And the point is for us to question whether their actions are actually their own faults or not. They're young and unwise and don't have anyone to guide them. I mean, it's hard as a young person to come to terms with the brutality of the world around you. It's hard to figure out how to deal with anxiety and stress and depression. Even someone who is relatively good-natured is liable to make poor decisions amidst struggle. I mean, Jisoo doesn't seem like the type of person who would run a compensated dating ring. He's constantly scared of the world he's dealing in and apparently in over his head. But that's part of why the show is so effective. It's shocking to see this quiet, nerdy kid masterminding such a scheme, and we are thus forced to grapple with his moral standing. We want to say he's a nice boy, but then again, he's done some kind of bad things. However, there's no answer. There's no good or bad characters, or at least it'd be too simplistic for us to set our sights so low. Instead, just sit back and try to connect and identify with what they're going through and the mistakes they make. Me personally, I did some really stupid things when I was 18 out of stress, anger, sadness, and so on. Okay, really stupid things. I mean, wow, amazing. Actually, I still do stupid things all the time due to such emotions and just general idiocy. Overall, no, I don't think that Jisoo or any of the characters belong in the world they've been thrust into, or perhaps thrust themselves into. This is why Mr. Lee, the guardian devil of the characters, tells Jisoo this.
우리 더 이상은 만나지 맙시다.
Mr. Lee is really saying to Jisoo, kid, get out of this world. The question is, when is it too late to do so? If you stay in the underworld long enough, do you eventually adapt to it, become worthy of it? It seems for Yuri and Jisoo, this is true. All Jisoo wanted to do was run his little compensated dating business, but one thing led to another, and all of a sudden he was lost amidst a nightmare, on the lam from the law, a wanted criminal. I think if there was a moment that affected me in the show more than any other, it was the staircase scene. Imagine how Jisoo felt in this moment. Min-hee recorded him admitting to illicit actions. She held the key to ruining his life, and yet in a way, she would be justified in turning him in. But he's the good guy. We don't want that to happen to him, right? And I think to some degree he probably knew that Min-hee was in the right. And so here he was, stuck between wanting to atone and not wanting to go to jail. Talk about despair. And thus, in desperation, he ended up nearly killing Min-hee as she plummeted down the steps due to him trying to rip her phone from her. Everything started with Jisoo just wanting to live a normal life.
나는 그냥 학교도 다니고 대학도 가고 그냥 평범하게 살려고.
And now here he was, with blood on his hands. But is it his fault for making the decisions he did? Or did the society he was thrust into by the forces of nature force his hands to dirty deeds? That's the question, and it's an age-old question that speaks to the debate between free will and determinism, between spontaneity and prime movers, between fate and choice. But ultimately, I think it'd be fair to be more simple here and say that if society was just a touch more just, a bit more structured towards protecting its youth rather than engineering them for the fray, then Jisoo and his friends wouldn't have had to ride down the road they did, that perilous path which led them unto doom, or close to it. Anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Extracurricular. I know a lot of you love it though. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that damn notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben. I'll catch you next time. Generation Ochi, peace.